Stop the steal!
I just want to find 11,780 votes.
All across the country, Trump-endorsed election conspiracy theorists are now running to oversee those elections.
Only 22 days away from the most consequential election in our history.
This November, American voters will go to the polls for the country's midterm elections.
The balance of power on Capitol Hill is at stake.
It's the first major ballot since the January 6th insurrection and Donald Trump's efforts to undermine the vote in 2020, making it crucial for restoring belief in the electoral system and trying to heal some of the violent polarization tearing America apart.
There's probably about 300 Proud Boys. They're marching eastbound.
But there's a problem. Far-right activists and members of violent militias are now standing for office themselves.
They're going to try to take away our gun rights, freedom of religion, parental rights, and more, and further violate the Constitution in unimaginable ways.
This is how a shocking number of candidates in the 2022 midterms have links to far-right groups, how this is becoming a battle for the soul of the Republican Party and potentially a threat to the norms of American democracy itself.
Make no mistake, there's a civil war going on right now in the Republican Party.
The key moment in this transformation of the far right is probably the events of January 6th. The attempted insurrection was not actually as isolated an incident as it's often portrayed. There had been at least 39 instances of confrontations between the authorities and armed militias at government facilities in the previous year, and literally thousands of other far-right gatherings and demonstrations throughout Donald Trump's term in office, often prominently featuring guns.
A group of armed Trump supporters gathered outside the FBI office in Phoenix, Arizona.
This is what happened when the talking stopped, when the far-right Proud Boys squared off against Antifa and other counter-protesters.
But after people began being prosecuted for the insurrection and trying to overthrow the American government, generating a fair bit of negative press, people on the far right started to look for new ways to seize power from the inside.
What are they hiding?
People with links to militias and extremist groups switching from their traditional anti-government posture and either standing as independents or infiltrating the Republican Party and becoming official GOP candidates.
And according to Q, again, I don't have any proof of this, many in our government are actively worshiping Satan.
These groups have been, they've been out there for a while, right? And they operated primarily on the fringe of society. I think what Donald Trump has done is to invite them in. And clearly, if you look at what happened around January 6th, it was almost like kind of an open invitation to come to Washington and make trouble. You may remember Charlottesville and the march there that led to violence. I think for the first time they felt in some ways that they were needed. The way that Trump talked about the threats coming from the other side and the integrity of America and all of those things being at risk, and oftentimes in militaristic terms.
Mark Finchem for Secretary of State. Mark Finchem will follow the law.
Mark Finchem is running to become Arizona's Secretary of State.
So you were at the Capitol on the 6th?
Yeah, along with a whole bunch of other people.
But he was also a member of the Oath Keepers, a violent militia who are one of the key extremist groups implicated in the January 6th insurrection. Finchem's not alone. Leaked emails have revealed that at least 28 elected officials have links to the Oath Keepers. Meanwhile, members of the extremist group, the Proud Boys, also heavily implicated in the January 6th riots, have taken up positions in key Republican Party local offices, such as in Miami, Florida, to try and steer the future of the party from the inside. One investigation showed that over 20% of Republican state legislators belong to at least one far-right Facebook group, and that doesn't include networks on platforms like Gab, Parler, and Telegram, where many extremist groups primarily operate.
Social media amplify all of those extremist positions, but also social media are particularly suited to creating and spreading conspiracy theories. We've already seen in other ways, from Al-Qaeda to ISIS, that you can use the social media presence to create a group of extremists. Donald Trump may have been an accelerant. He remains the cult leader. But if he disappeared tomorrow, most of these pathologies remain.
One illustration of this strategy of extremism from the inside can be seen in the sheer number of Republican political ads that openly feature guns and scenes of violence.
I'm going to Washington to stop the Pelosi agenda, and you're not going to silence me.
More than 100 Republican Party campaign ads have foregrounded guns or implicit threats of violence against political opponents.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband violently assaulted in their San Francisco home early this morning.
This after police say an intruder broke into their home overnight and attacked with a hammer.
This individual went to the alt-right, far-right type ideology that we've seen, talking QAnon, talking Pizzagate, and then just a lot of very anti-Semitic postings.
What's interesting is that the threats are often against other Republicans.
Join the MAGA crew, get a rhino hunting permit. There's no bagging limit, no tagging limit, and it doesn't expire until we save our country.
Extremist factions within the party, aligned with Donald Trump's MAGA movement, accuse traditional Republicans of being rhinos, or Republicans in name only.
For decades, we've had ads where rhetorical violence was implied. This seems to target citizens.
This election has become as much about what it means to be Republican as it is about who gains power in Congress.
The Republican Party has gone from being a traditional political party, a party that would look to solve problems in the country, abide by the norms of governance, and often had a fairly wide range of viewpoints expressed in it, to where it is now much closer to a cult than it is to a party. And what characterizes a cult is that the fear of being shunned or excommunicated, of being treated as an apostate, is an overwhelming one.
We must be very clear-eyed about the threat we face and about what is required to defeat it. I have said since January 6th that I will do whatever it takes to ensure Donald Trump is never again anywhere near the Oval Office, and I mean it.
One of the most concerning dynamics in this is that several of the extremist-aligned candidates, like Mark Fincham in Arizona, are running for positions that monitor and control elections themselves.
It's not right that hundreds of thousands of votes are allowed to be considered as lawful votes when we know they're illegal.
Ladies and gentlemen, we know it, and they know it. Donald Trump won.
A key article of faith amongst the GOP's new extremist wing has been to support Donald Trump's false claims that the 2020 election was stolen. In true MAGA spirit, politicians who fail to echo this conspiracist fantasy have been driven out by local party offices and membership, which have fallen under extremist control. If these candidates win in November, it casts serious concerns about how future elections may be carried out.
One of our analytical websites, 538.com, has looked at candidates for the House of Representatives in the elections upcoming. 126 who have, they say, a 95% plus chance of winning, are election deniers. These are people who are likely to be elected, and if the Republicans win a majority in the House, the majority is 218, you don't have to be a math genius to realize that significantly more than a majority of the Republicans who would be running the House of Representatives are extremist conspiracy theorists.
American democracy is under attack because the defeated former president of the United States refuses to accept the results of the 2020 election.
Extremism in the modern Republican Party is nothing new. Ever since the election of Barack Obama in 2008, the Tea Party were promoting a far-right economic agenda while flirting with racism and the violent fringes of the militia movement.
So many Tea Party Americans who are standing up and saying enough is enough, and we're going to take this government back and put it back on the side of we the people. It's a pretty simple message.
What's shocking is how these extreme positions have shifted to become the mainstream stance of large sections of the party. For instance, in 2010, Sharon Angle, the Republican Senate candidate in Nevada, proposed shutting down the likes of Social Security and abolishing the Department of Education.
And I don't think that the Department of Education is one of those essential involvements of the federal government.
This was considered an ultra-extreme position, and she lost the election. But flash forward to 2022, and virtually identical plans were being put forward by serving senators and Donald Trump's own education secretary.
I frankly don't think the Department of Education should exist. And that would get rid of a lot of the...
Did that play well?
To see how these dynamics can translate directly into policies that can profoundly affect people's lives, one only has to look at how the Christian nationalist edge of this movement has driven a decades-long push to take away women's abortion rights.
I think Christian nationalism has very deep roots in the U.S. It's almost entirely a white phenomenon. It is fundamentally anti-democratic in the sense that to a Christian nationalist, there are true Americans. Those are the Christian nationalists, the white Christians, and then there are the other Americans. And then I do think it has this tolerance of violence, really sharp lines about what's right and what's wrong. And you start to think like that, and then it becomes the case that the ends justify the means.
Because it is not Joe Biden that rules this country. Jesus Christ is the king of everything in this world.
In the run-up to the 2022 elections, there's even some evidence that in a few cases, Democrats have financially supported more extreme candidates in Republican primaries, believing that they would be easier to beat in the general election.
This is Republican State Senator Doug Mastriano. He's the Republican who's ahead in the polls for governor. He wants to outlaw abortion.
I think it's blood money. I mean, it is complete negligence to put money after candidates that could conceivably win.
The most urgent question in all this is whether this is a matter of a relatively small but noisy group of extremists who have hijacked the Republican Party apparatus, or whether it represents a broader shift in the beliefs of right-wing voters. And the only way we'll know the answer to that question is with the election results themselves.
Like many people thought in both 2016 and 2020, that what's on the ballot is the soul of America. And when people feel that way on both the right and the left, then it gets to be pretty heated, pretty ugly. And the losers, if they think they got cheated, who knows where we go from there.
If Trump's hand-picked MAGA candidates do well this November, the party looks likely to continue its drift into extremism. But if they fail to deliver, there may yet be hope that the GOP could return to looking more like a political party and less like an unhinged far-right cult. The only thing that's certain is that this election matters.